Hi everybody, welcome back to Curtis Hustis Photography and Video, where we're not just camera owners, but we're photographers, darn it. And today we're actually going to be talking about a camera that is very forward thinking. What camera is that? We'll be right back with that. So what is it? What camera am I talking about? Late last year, Zeiss introduced or announced a camera that they're going to be manufacturing in 2019. Now, Zeiss isn't really known for cameras. Of course, we know them for their optics that they make for lenses and things like that. Carl Zeiss lenses have always been a premium lens with great optics, with great clarity, sharp lenses. They've been very well known for their lenses over many, many years. But they actually have come up and designed a camera for the first time in many years that is very forward thinking. And that's the Zeiss ZX1. If you're unfamiliar with the Zeiss ZX1 and its specifications, let me go over some of the specs just so you can get an idea of what this camera is and everything that it can do, just so we're all on the same page. So the Zeiss ZX1, and I've got all the specs right here in my hot little hand, is going to be a 37.4 megapixel camera. It's going to be a full frame sensor, CMOS sensor. It's of course going to shoot JPEGs, but it's also going to be shooting RAW files. Now the RAW files are going to be different, okay? One difference automatically. Typically speaking, when we shoot RAW files with Nikon, Canon, Fuji, what have you, the RAW files are proprietary to that manufacturer. So every time a new camera gets announced, you can't just plug it into Lightroom. Adobe has to update their software to accommodate that particular RAW file. Zeiss has decided not to go with a standard proprietary RAW format, but instead they're going to use the Adobe Dng Format, which is really good news. The Dng format was developed by Adobe to sort of make everything universal. So in other words, let's say I've got a camera that's 12 years old and the RAW files are no longer supported by software, which I have not run into yet. But let's just say that for whatever reason, there wasn't a popular camera, the RAW files aren't supported by that particular software. All of a sudden, my software would not be able to read that particular RAW file. Theoretically, Adobe, as long as Adobe's around, as long as they support the Dng format, your files will always be read. Whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, the software should be able to read that Dng file. So that's good. So we won't have to wait for an update for Adobe Lightroom or Capture One. As long as it can read a Dng file, it can support it. So the max resolution is going to be 7488 by 4992. So if you do the math, that's 37 megapixels. It's a 3x2 format, so typical full frame format. Medium format would be a 2x3 format. I shoot a GFX 50S, which is a medium format camera, and that is a 2x3 format. So typical full frame aspect ratio, 3x2. It's a fixed lens, 35mm, 8 elements, 5 groups. It's a 2.0, so a relatively fast lens. The filter thread in the end is going to be 52mm, and it will focus as close as 11.81 inches, 12 inches, so as close as a foot away. ISO sensitivity will be between 80, not 800, 80 to 51,200. So not as high as some of these cameras will go, but 51,200 is pretty darn good. The shutter speed is a little bit of a different. It's using a leaf shutter on the camera. So the leaf shutter is actually built into the lens, and it'll go from a 1/30th of a second to 1/8000th of a second. So, and we'll get back to that leaf shutter here in a minute and why that may be good or why that may be bad. It's got a built-in solid state drive or a built-in SSD. So there is no SD card slot, micro SD card slots. You don't have to worry about SD cards. It's got a built-in 512 gigabyte solid state drive. So that's good. That could be bad. It's up to you. The solid state drives are pretty reliable. I don't foresee a problem with that. You don't have to worry about SD cards failing. It is internal, so you cannot swap it out without sending it back to the manufacturer. So that might be an issue. Video recording. It does video recording, but only in 4K. It only does 30 frames per second. In 1080p, it'll do 60 frames a second. But that's all the information I have on videos. So as a hybrid shooter, if you're a hybrid shooter, this may or may not be the camera for you. Of course, the viewfinder is electronic. The view coverage is 100%. And on the back end of the camera, on the viewing screen, it's got a 4.34-inch LCD touchscreen, 100% coverage. This is important because this is a forward-thinking camera, and I'll tell you why here in a second. It's got a 1/8-inch microphone jack, a headphone jack, and a USB-C type port, so you can transfer files to your computer. It's got built-in Wi-Fi, built-in Bluetooth, and it's got a rechargeable lithium-ion battery. And it's 1.76 pounds, so just under 2 pounds. So let's talk about some of the things. Now, it's got a 35mm fixed focal length lens. So if you're a travel photographer or you like to do street photography, this can be good or bad. I mean, when I travel, the lens that usually stays on my camera almost all the time is a 16-35 lens. Whether I was shooting with Sony, Nikon, whatever, it's usually a 16-35mm lens. So one of the reasons I started looking at this camera is because I shoot on a day-to-day basis with this guy. This is a Fuji GFX 50S, and it's a big camera. It is, as you can see, it's big. It's big, bulky. No matter where you take it, people will recognize it, or they'll see it, they'll assume it's a professional camera, and it just brings notice to you. Also, it's heavy. It's a heavy camera. I like a heavy camera. I like a big camera, but if I'm traveling, maybe I want something smaller. So this is where this Zeiss ZX1 comes into play. I think it would be a great alternative. The lens is a 35mm f2.0 lens. It has a leaf shutter in it. Now, my Fuji has a mechanical shutter in it. And the mechanical shutter, I mean, it's not quiet. It's, you know, fairly loud. So you take a photograph, if I can get it, and you can hear it take a photo. So, you know, it's not that quiet. It's not that quiet at all. If I can get it to focus, of course it's dark. Okay, so it's not that loud, but it is louder than just like a click. With the Zeiss ZX1, it uses a leaf shutter, and so the leaf shutter is actually in the lens itself. Typically, we see leaf shutters in large format cameras and some medium format cameras like the Hasselblad. But when we talk about a leaf shutter on a large format camera, you'll have a cocking mechanism on the shutter. You'll have the shutter release on the lens itself, and then you'll have a flash sync on the lens itself. So it's all contained in the lens. So when you would put it on a large format camera, everything that you would connect to the camera would be connected through that lens. And when you would actuate the shutter, you would just hear a little click, very, very quiet, okay? So one advantage to the Zeiss ZX1 is that it's going to be a very, very quiet camera with a leaf shutter. Leaf shutter also gives you some advantages with flash sync speeds. In other words, it'll be able to sync your flash throughout the whole range of shutter speeds. So if you're trying to darken your environment, darken the ambient light, in a typical camera like this, I would have to use high-speed sync or a neutral density filter on the front to darken the environment, and then use the strobe to add light to it. We can do the same thing, but with the Zeiss camera, but we don't have to use a neutral density filter. We don't, and it's sort of like high-speed sync in a way, in that it enables you to sync the flash at a higher shutter speed, and that's what high-speed sync does. It enables you to flash the sync at one, like on the Fuji, up to 1/4000th of a second. So I can darken the environment, and I can get that darker ambient light and expose with the flash. With the leaf shutter, it's not using high-speed sync, it's just using the fact that it can sync at 8,000ths of a second. That's good because high-speed sync actually reduces the amount of power coming out of the strobe, because it's actually pulsing when it fires, and so to expose the whole scene or the whole sensor. Whereas with the leaf shutter, it'll just have its normal burst, and it'll sync at up to 8,000ths of a second. At least that's what it says, right? So, and these are all specs, and this is what I'm gleaning off the website. But just so you know, that's what they're saying. I have not actually got my hands on one. I've not actually played with one. Zeiss isn't paying me to say anything. I'm just very excited about this camera. Another really cool thing about this camera is that all camera systems use some sort of Android operating system. They don't use Apple because Apple, of course, is copyrighted, and you can only use Apple on Apple products. But like the menu system on this camera is actually a version of an Android system, and all camera systems will have a version of their operating system. They use an Android type system. Same type of Android systems. It's not exactly like you have on your phone, but it's customized to the cameras, so you can have a menu system and you can go through and select what you want. The Zeiss has designed their system so now it has built-in Adobe Lightroom Cc. Now this isn't the Adobe Lightroom Cc that you have on your computer. It's an Adobe Lightroom Cc that is designed for this camera. So your slider bars will be easily manipulated. Remember, it's got a 4.34-inch touchscreen on the back. It'll pop out your slider bars and you can adjust all those really cool things on the back of the camera very easily. This camera is also designed for uploading your photographs to social media, to Dropbox, to what have you, straight from the camera. So it's really forward thinking in that, and no camera does this except for the Zeiss, that you have editing software on the actual camera itself. It's got a big display on back so you can see and do your edit, and then you can share your photographs straight from the camera. Another thing it allows you to do is it allows you to update the software of the camera directly to the camera without having to connect it to a computer. It'll automatically connect to a Wi-Fi system through your phone or directly to a Wi-Fi system. It'll download the software update and update the firmware of the camera right there. So you don't have to actually load it onto a card and then load it into your camera and then do this all rigmarole. It makes it much, much easier. And this is where I think this is revolutionary. Zeiss has actually thought out of the box of what a typical camera is. It has thought about what a camera should be. And there's no reason why any of these cameras can't have the same functionality. Really. I mean, we've made great strides. They have Wi-Fi, they have Bluetooth. But why can't they connect to a Wi-Fi and upload their own firmware? Why can't we take our photos straight from the camera and upload it to Instagram or Facebook or to Dropbox? Is there a reason why we can't? No, it's just because they haven't taken the time to do it. Well, Zeiss has done this. Now you're probably thinking 35 millimeter. Why 35 millimeter? Well, 35 millimeter is actually a pretty good focal length. As I said before, what lived on my camera before when I travel is a 16 to 35. Did I actually take a 70 to 200 2.8 with me? Yes. Did I actually use it? No. Maybe once or twice. Maybe 5 trips I pulled it out once or twice. The lens that lived on my camera was the 16 to 35. maybe a nifty 50, a 50 millimeter lens I'd put on it. But for the most part, that 16 to 35 would give me the wide angles, and then I could zoom in, okay, to 35 millimeter. 35 millimeters can be a good portrait lens. Are you going to be able to compress the background like you would with a 70 to 200 or 200 millimeter 2.8? No, you're not going to be able to compress the background. It's just the nature of the camera or the nature of the lens. Does wide angle give distortion to the subject? It can, but you just have to know that the lens is going to do that, and then you have to shoot from the right angles to avoid or lessen that distortion. 35 millimeter can be an excellent portrait lens. There's no reason why you can't, as long as you know how wide angles work and you know how things distort with the wide angle. You can avoid a lot of it, to tell you the truth. So it's got a 35 millimeter 2.0 lens, which will be fast. It's got decent ISO. It's a full frame sensor, so noise should be good on it with a full frame sensor. And you know, you can take good photographs with any camera. But the fact is that the Zeiss ZX1 is sort of the all-in-one package. Would I actually have to take my laptop or an iPad with me to take photos? I don't know. I would probably take it the first trip with me. But would I take it after that? Do I really need to take a laptop? It's got a 512 gigabyte hard drive, and I've never shot 512 gigs worth of photos on a trip. Does it mean that I won't shoot 512? I might. It's got the USB-C, so I could probably transfer it. If I have a fast enough Wi-Fi connection while I'm traveling, I can upload my files every day via the web or the cloud to, let's say, Dropbox, and then I would have them stored, and then I could start over again once I know that they're secure. So, do you need a laptop? I probably wouldn't take one. I might take an iPad with Photoshop CC on it, or Lightroom CC on it. But Lightroom is sort of built into it. And if I'm just trying to give people a snapshot of some of the things I'm doing, then I don't necessarily have to take a laptop. I mean, let's face it, I don't really spend a lot of time editing photographs on a trip. I'm usually doing my tours, and I'm eating. I eat quite a bit on trips, sampling the local fare. But that's what we do, right? So I'll take the photograph, I'll review it on the back of the camera, but I really don't go through all the photographs until I go home. If there's one photograph that's exceptional, yes, I might want to take it just so I can show people what I'm doing and share it via social media or email it to a friend. But honestly, if I have the camera and my phone, I could do the Lightroom CC on the camera, transfer it to my phone, and then email it straight from my phone. So, my kit has just got exceptionally lightweight and easy to handle. I've got the one camera, I've got my phone, maybe an iPad, and that's it. The camera itself is actually a pretty good looking camera. It's got the dials on it, it's got an ISO dial, and it's got a shutter speed dial on top. And then everything else is touchscreen interface on the back. From what I can see, it's very intuitive. I'd like to see it when it gets out. Would it be something that I'm interested in getting? Definitely. Is it something that is going to cost a lot of money? I have no idea. So the price on it, I'm guessing it's probably going to be around $2,000, but it could be up towards $3,000. I'm not sure. Am I willing to spend $3,000 on a camera like that I just use for trips? I don't know. It might be my everyday camera. You know, I don't carry this with me everywhere I go, just because it's big, bulky. I just don't do it. So would it be, I usually have my cell phone with me. Would this be a camera that I might just carry with me to carry around? I might. So tell me what you think. Make some comments in the comments below. Make some comments in the comments below. Comment in the comments below. And if you've already done it, then you've commented in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you can get notified. You know, the ZX1 is coming out sometime in 2019. When it actually is coming out, I am not sure. I'm going to France in June, so hopefully it'll be out before I go to France in June. And I'll be going there for about 2 weeks. If it doesn't come out before then I'm taking the Fuji. And the Fuji is going to be fantastic. Don't get me wrong, I love this camera. The dynamic range on this thing is incredible. It's a beautiful camera. It's just, I love it. Okay, but would I like to take the ZX1 in instead at 37.4 megapixels? Yeah, I'd give it a whirl, you know, and we'll see how it goes. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.